On the next segment of our video, we're going to walk you through the audit form. The audit form is intuitive and anyone can fill it out. The audit form consists of 3 pages for a standard 2 walk-in box facility. If the facility has more than 2 walk-in boxes, feel free to make as many copies of page 2 as necessary. To begin, let's look at page 1. On the top portion of page 1, there's a section for the customer contact information. The site contact can be facility manager, janitor, or the kitchen manager. Hours of operation and seasonal schedule if applicable. Now we move on to the walk-in box information. Under cooler/freezer name, write down the identification factor of that cooler, whether it has a name, dairy cooler, meat cooler, etc., or a number. If it does not have a specific ID, you can call it cooler 1 or freezer 1. Please write down the walk-in box manufacturer and if it's a cooler or freezer. The temperature you will find on the thermometer somewhere on the front door or near the front panel. Now we move inside. We're going to look for a thermostat which controls the evaporator coil. This we will label T1 for thermostat number 1. We now move next to the evaporator coil. List the number of fans and the number of sets, and if the data you're obtaining is from a nameplate or it's estimated. Next, we are going to get the length, width, and height. In other words, the dimension of this walk-in box. As we turn around and are ready to walk out of the walk-in space, you will notice that there's a label on that wall or on the edge of the door, which will give you the electrical data for the door heaters. If the door heaters are working, please write yes and continue with the data. If they do not work, please write no, and you could just cross off the other sections pertaining to the door heater. To double check if the door heaters are functional, you could place your hands on them and feel if they're warm. You could use a tick tracer to see if it's functional. If you see cables going to the door, it's a good indication that there's a door heater as well. Door frame heater, door heater, and sometimes there's also a glass on the door, so there's a glass heater. When you locate the compressor, whether it's outside, on top of the walk-in box, in a basement, or on the rooftop, look for the nameplate on that compressor. On it, you will find the name and also the electrical data for the compressor and for the condenser. You may write those here. If for some reason that nameplate data is not found or scratched off or worn off by the weather, take as many pictures as you can of the inside of the compressor/condenser unit. There may be some indicators by looking at the pictures to give us the opportunity to estimate what that equipment may be. Moving on to the next section, you will notice check boxes. This was done to make it easier for the person auditing the space. The walk-in location, where that walk-in box is. The ceiling type is important because we may need to get on top of the cooler to route some wires or conduit. Next, the compressor location is important because we may need to connect to it and connect back to the controller. In other words, route cables back and forth. So knowing where the compressor is very important, and also the compressor distance. Lastly, on page 1, there's a notes section. On this section, you can write as many notes as you'd like about this specific walk-in box. Now we'll move on to page 2 of the walk-in audit process. You will notice that page 2 resembles page 1 with the exception of the top portion of the page. But collecting the walk-in box data along with the compressor, condenser, evaporator, door heater data is the same as page 1. If this facility has multiple walk-in boxes, then you would use 1 page per walk-in box. Lastly, we have the layout drawing. This is page 3 of the audit form. As you can see, this drawing resembles the kitchen layout as we walked it on video 1 of this series. The layout drawing is an important part of this audit because it will help us understand where the walk-ins and the equipment are located in respect to each other. As we walked through the door into the kitchen from the hallway, you will notice that the walk-in cooler is located on our right hand side, and right across it you will notice the manager's office on our left hand side. When you walk into the cooler, you will notice the evaporator is on the right hand side, indicated on this drawing as a rectangle with 2 X's. The X's represent the number of motors. Behind the evaporator coil, you will notice the thermostat, and it's drawn in by a little square. We'll continue to walk into the freezer. And as you remember from video 1, that walk-in freezer access, or the door to get into the freezer, is within the cooled space. And we do the same here. As we walk in through the door, immediately in front of you, you will notice the evaporator coil. Again, drawn in by a rectangle, 2 X's. The X's indicate the number of motors, and the thermostat, which is the little box drawn behind the unit. As we walk out of the cooled space, you will notice on the right hand side a prep table and a hood. And again, this is just a reference point. Now we need to access the compressor condensers, which are located outside ground level, as you saw on video 2 of this series. At this time, record the data from the nameplate and also estimate the distance between the compressor to the walk-in box, because we may have to connect to them. And this concludes our audit process. Thank you.